Hey guys, we're ready for chapter 5, which is called Oops. When we got back to our cabin after dinner, the place was trashed. No surprise there. Gary and his buddies had obviously swung by to say a little thank you. That made the score 1-1. One set of mouths filled with shaving cream, one trashed cabin. Of course, I hoped that would be the end, but I couldn't have been more wrong. As soon as it got dark, we began Jimmy Jack's super plan to get the goons in the morning. That night, each group followed their instructions to the letter. Opera and I dug a deep hole in the path that led to the woods. Wall Street used her phone to call information. She got the number of the general store in town, but that was only the beginning. Tomorrow morning, she'd make an even more important call. The eggheads had 3 assignments. Group 1 quietly collected all the garbage, especially the slimy, smelly stuff in the kitchen. Group 2 rigged up a long plank at the edge of our hole, and Group 3 tied a rope around the top of a young pine tree and pulled it all the way down to the ground. The girls' job was simple: charm all the rich kids with feather pillows to donate them to the cause. And the athletes? Well, the athletes didn't have to wait for morning to see their plan work. First, they connected all the garden hoses from the maintenance shack. Next, they attached one end to the outside faucet, ran the other end over to Gary's cabin, and quietly slipped it through the big crack under the door. Then they put tape all along the crack. Finally, they turned on the water. Gary was the first to wake up. He'd been dreaming about a beautiful stream with beautiful running water. For a second after he woke, he thought he still heard running water. Lying on his stomach, he frowned. How could it be? I'm inside the cabin. There's no running water here. Obviously, he was still dreaming. He had to be. How else could he see a shoe floating past his nose? A shoe? Followed by a suitcase. A suitcase? And then the other shoe. A flood! Gary shouted as he bolted up in bed. We're in a flood! Without stopping to think, or even wake up, the other 2 goons leaped from their bunks and hit the flooded floor. Splashing and slipping, they fell face first in the icy water. This was followed by more splashing, sipping, and falling as they kept screaming, "A flood! A flood! A flood!" By now, the whole camp stood outside their cabin, busting a gut with laughter as the goons kept banging on their doors, screaming, "Let us out! A flood! A flood! A flood!" Finally, the door flew open and the water swooshed out of the cabin along with the 3 of them, coughing. It was truly a sight to behold. "McDougal!" Gary screamed as he staggered to his feet, dripping wet and gasping for air. "I'll get you for this," he shouted, searching the crowd. "I'll get you!" But McDougal was nowhere to be found. I'd already made a beeline back to my cabin where I'd be safe and sound. Or so I thought. The best I figure it was about 5 the next morning when I woke up. There was a tickling feeling on my face. Even though I was half asleep, I knew it was just a joke. Opera or one of the guys tickling me with a feather or something. It was an old trick, made me to think that something was crawling on me. "Come on, guys," I mumbled. But the tickling continued. Now I felt it over my arms and legs, too. Opera probably had the whole cabin helping in the joke. "Give it up, Opera. Go back to bed." But he didn't answer. "Opera?" Finally, I heard him mumble and mutter from his bunk above me. If you ask me, it was a pretty lousy imitation of someone pretending to be asleep. "Opera, you're not fooling anyone." The tickling grew worse. Finally, I pried my eyes open. "Okay, guys, the joke's over." But there was no joke. There was no Opera. There was nobody. Just a zillion little black ants crawling all over me. "Ah!" I screamed as I leaped out of my bed and began dancing around trying to slap them off. "Ooh!" Opera cried as he tumbled down from his bed and began his own version of the dance. Soon, everyone in the cabin was jumping out of bed, shouting and dancing and slapping. "Ah! Ooh! Ow! Ee!" The entire cabin had been crisscrossed with streams of honey. The sticky goo was everywhere, on the floor, on our beds, and all over our bodies. And wherever there was honey, there were ants. Lots and lots of ants. "Ah! Ooh! Ow! "The showers!" I yelled. "Hit the showers!" When we threw open our cabin door, you couldn't miss the thick trail of ants that swarmed underneath it. The thick trail of ants that followed a thick trail of honey. Honey that someone had laid from the anthills in the woods all the way to our cabin. We finally arrived at the showers. Nice work, Gary, I thought as I stepped into the icy cold water. That makes the score 2-2. Hope you're ready for the tiebreaker, 'cause it's coming up, and it's coming up real soon. 8:57 a.m. and counting. Everything was set. Everyone was ready. The ant attack was history. There was nothing compared to our plans for the greatest humiliation of all time. 8:58 a.m. and counting. The hole was dug and filled with the slimiest of garbage. Wall Street had phoned the general store and convinced them to make an emergency delivery of chocolate syrup. The girls had ripped the pillows and carefully placed them on the bent pine tree. Everyone was hiding along the path. Everyone but me. I was the bait. 8:59 a.m. and counting. We all knew that Gary and his goons snuck into the woods after breakfast. We all knew they had to come down this path to be at the softball field for Dale's 9 o'clock talk. We had everything calculated and planned to the exact minute. So now I stood on the path, waiting. I wasn't thrilled about being the bait, but I was the logical choice. After all, I was the hero. I gave a nervous look at the hole in front of me. It was covered with a bedsheet and a thin layer of leaves to disguise it and make it look like the rest of the path. 9 o'clock a.m. Our digital watch/alarms went off like a flock of chirping birds. And then right on time, "Hey, Weasel!" It was Gary. He threw a sneer at his partners. They picked up their pace toward me. They couldn't believe their luck. There I was, their worst enemy, alone and defenseless. Or so they thought. "Don't move," he growled. "I want to talk to you." I swallowed hard and glanced at the hidden hole between us. "Sure," I squeaked. I looked back at Gary and the goons. 10 more steps and they'd be in the hole, swimming in the slimy garbage. But that was only the beginning. Yes, sir, it was going to be wonderful. Then something happened. Something we'd never planned. Something our worst imaginings never imagined. "Hey, Wally?" It was Dale. He was coming around the bend behind me. "There you are. Listen, we've got to talk about last night." "Oh, please, God, anything but this." I snapped my head back to Gary. 6 more steps. 6 more steps, and he'd crash into the pit, right in front of Dale. I had to act fast. Quickly, I raced around the covered hole to Gary's side. "Hold it," I shouted. "Oh, Gary," Dale grinned. "You're here too. Good." Gary suddenly looked disappointed. He obviously figured Dale was coming to my rescue again. But not this time. This time, no one could rescue me. Not when Dale was walking directly toward us and the pit. "Dale, don't!" I shouted and started toward him. But I didn't get far. Old Gorilla Boy grabbed me by the back of the shirt where Dale couldn't see. "You're not getting away this time," he muttered. "But you don't No way." "Hey, look, guys," Dale said, coming closer and closer to the pit. "It's time you knock this stuff off." "Look out," I tried to say, but Gary had my shirt pulled so tight that the words stuck in my throat. "What do you mean?" Gary asked innocently. "You know what I mean," Dale answered. My eyes were as big as saucers. Forget saucers. How about satellite dishes? 4 more steps. 4 more steps, and Dale was a goner. I looked desperately toward my partners hiding in the bushes. They were nowhere to be seen. "I'm talking about all these stunts you've been pulling," Dale said as he continued to approach. 3 more steps. 2 more steps. 1 more step. And I couldn't watch. I closed my eyes, but nothing happened. Nothing at all. I took a peek. Miraculously, Dale had come to a stop. He had reached the edge of the hole, but went no further. I couldn't believe it. "What luck!" "Stunts?" Gary asked, still playing it all innocent. "We're not pulling any stunts, are we, Wally?" He let go of my shirt just enough so I could answer. "Stunts?" I coughed. Dale looked me straight in the eyes, but I couldn't look back. I was too busy watching his feet. I was too busy watching them teeter on the edge of the pit. Just 1 inch forward and everything would give way. Just 1 inch forward and my career as a kid would be over. I don't mind some good-natured fun, Dale continued. He shoved his hands into his pockets and began rocking back and forth like he always did when he lectured. And with each rock, he seemed to tip a little closer to the edge. But there's nothing fun about what you guys are pulling. Not only is it mean, but it's downright dangerous. Hasn't anything I've said about wisdom gotten through to you guys? Yes, I cried in a panic. Everything, everything. Dale looked at me puzzled. So did Gary. He gets kind of emotional, Gary offered. After a second, Dale continued. Look, all I'm suggesting is that, and then it happened. He rocked forward just a little too far and suddenly dropped out of sight, right into the chest-deep pit of slimy garbage. It was like a nightmare watching him wallow in it, slipping, sliding, falling, and finally gaining his balance and then beginning the routine all over again. But that was only for starters. Pretty soon he spotted the board we had hung over the hole. No! I cried out. Not the board! But no one heard. I watched in horror as Dale grabbed hold of the board for help. But it was another one of our traps. For as the board tipped toward him, so did a huge drum of chocolate syrup at the other end. A huge drum of chocolate syrup that tipped over and spilled out all of its contents. Whoosh! Glug, glug, glug. The chocolate syrup washed all over Dale like a flood. Suddenly, he no longer looked like a counselor. Suddenly, he looked very much like a chocolate-covered peanut. He came up out of the flood coughing and sputtering. Unfortunately, it wasn't over yet. Not quite. When the drum emptied, it triggered the rope that tied down the nearby pine tree. The pine tree snapped up, sending the contents of 8 feather pillows high into the air, directly over the pit. As the feathers gently floated down into the hole, they began to stick all over Dale's gooey body. No longer did our counselor look like a giant chocolate-covered peanut. Now he looked like a giant chocolate-covered chicken. Gary looked at me. I looked at Gary. Oops, was all I could think of to say. So that's the end of chapter 5. Chapter 6 will be uh-oh, and I will get that to you on Monday. Have a great weekend, guys. I'll be in touch about next week's assignments. Bye.